Okay, so we are recording. So let me just cover a couple of quick things before we move into tonight's lecture. First thing would be last week's assignments, the written assignment, and I wanted to give you kind of an example regarding headings. Remember, we talked about headings, even if it's a supplemental report. So our last week's assignment was a supplemental report where basically the detective was calling a possible suspect who they believed was embezzling money or stealing money. And again, this is just kind of an example. It's no different with a supplemental versus a regular crime report, etc., where you're going to use headings. So remember, as part of pretty much any report, it doesn't mean you're going to use every heading. It just means that using headings are going to help you. So, your notification can be the fact that you were doing a follow-up. There's a victim statement. In this particular case, last week there was a suspect statement. And then there was an investigation. Go ahead, Destiny.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you that quick. But you said sometimes we won't use all the headings. So do you still want us to put the headings in, even though we're not going to use them, just to remember it, or
No, you don't have
only?
to. Only if you're going to use them.
Okay.
It just makes it really easy with the headings. That way you kind of don't forget anything. And some of you chose to. So here, you have the notification, a victim statement, which would have been the owner, the suspect statement, because there was an interview, even though it was over the phone. There's an investigation portion where, and then, think a little bit outside of the box on the investigation, because in this case, if you looked at some of the comments I made, the question might come around, do you need to Mirandize this person? And, if you remember our interview and interrogation things, typically you can Mirandize the individual, but remember, custody and interrogation, there's those two parts. If you're missing one, you don't necessarily have to read someone their rights because they're not in custody. They're free to go because they're not there. This is just a follow-up interview over the phone. So, I mean, but those are things I want you to think about. This student, and I hope you don't mind me sharing, decided to do the face page. Remember, with a supplemental, you can do the face page part, or you can just do the supplemental, just the narrative. If you just do the narrative, make sure you reference the narrative to the other report, to the main report. So, so we've done a couple of supplementals so far, so this should be coming a little bit easier now. But start thinking a little bit outside of the box when you start writing some of this stuff. Any questions on last week's? I mean, we're already kind of past it. If you were unable to submit, you still have until, I think I gave everybody until tomorrow night at 11. So just to try to make up some points. So if you're still hanging out there and you didn't get it done, take advantage of the opportunity to go ahead and do that. Now, this week's is a little bit of a twist. And I love twists. So let's look at this week's. So this week is going to be, it's a burglary case. And if you've had a chance to watch the scenario, it's not very long. I expounded a little bit on the information in here just so you could start to, and I'll start to do this every writing assignment now, where if there's a crime, I'll tell you what it is. I even put in a little link to the section if you wanted to actually read it. And, if you're interested, so you know exactly kind of what burglary actually is. I tell you who's involved. So you have the two officers, a potential suspect, and a business owner. So these are the people involved in this. I gave you just a little bit of a scenario on what happens here. The officers respond to a burglary alarm. They find an open door to the business. They find someone inside who basically at first said that he was trying to get out of the cold, but when the officers looked at the scene, they found some property that was stacked up by a window or by a door, I can't remember, which means that the person was actually moving some property. So his intent was more than likely to take it. Otherwise, why would you stack it up by a window? So, there's that kind of part there. And then in law enforcement, when you arrest somebody, typically for a felony, okay, when they end up going to the county jail, because they're not going to get a cite release on a felony, they're going to end up going over to the local county jail, and the officer has to send what we call a probable cause statement with all of the paperwork and the arrestee to the county jail. And every county jail has basically kind of an administrative supervisor. Sometimes it's a commander, sometimes it can be a sergeant, it just depends. But they look at your probable cause form. And if you don't send this form over with your arrestee, chances are they're going to let your suspect out. But if you send the form over, you're showing the booking person that here's my probable cause to arrest this person. And then typically, unless they make bail, that person will stay in custody until they're arraigned, and then the judge will decide whether they stay in jail or get out, etc. But this is really important because you don't want people to get arbitrarily released. And these affidavits are basically used in two things. Again, you make an arrest in the field for a felony, or you get a search warrant. But we're not going to go into the search warrant. The probable cause forms, and I'm going to show you what they look like, so don't panic. There's two of them, and this is just kind of a snapshot out of your forms page. I gave you two different options for a probable cause form. There's one from Rialto and then one from the Sheriff's Department. So just to kind of show you what they look like. And again, it's not a lot. You're not rewriting your report. You're giving the booking officer, you're just showing that person the probable cause that you had to arrest this person. Here's a very quick example. Here's one from Rialto. And you can see it's not very much. It's like what? Maybe kind of a big fat paragraph. That's about it. And it's just a summary. So here, we'll kind of go through it. This one says on Monday, there's the date at this particular time. This officer was working traffic enforcement, saw a car with expired registration. They stopped the car and they ran the person's driver's license and found that the person was on felony probation for assault with a deadly weapon with a firearm with search terms. So the officers searched the car and they found a loaded firearm, which is a felony, okay, especially if you're on felony probation. That's it. That's the probable cause that the officer had to arrest the person. Again, it's not rewriting the whole report. It's just a little statement that you show the booking officer and the judge, etc. Hey, here's my PC for arresting this person and sending them over to county jail. Let me give you another example. Let's see. Here's a domestic violence case. Again, it's just a big paragraph. It doesn't have to be you're not going to write your whole report. Here, you can see the officer, they were dispatched to this particular address in regards to a domestic violence. They got there, they contacted a male. Here's his name. They used John Smith, and a female, and who they refer here to as the victim for confidentiality. They said they were involved in an argument, but when the officer spoke to the victim, she got her hair pulled and she was slapped during the argument. She had visible redness on her face, etc. So the officer arrested the person. It's not the whole report. It's just a very quick little summary that shows that there was enough probable cause for the officer to arrest. So without just kind of beating a dead horse, and I can post one or two of these. I'll actually do that later tonight. I'll post one of these probable cause forms so you can look at it. So that way you can get an idea on what you might have to write. So for your probable cause for this particular scenario that we're talking about, it would be that the officers, you know, I responded to a burglary alarm. We contacted an individual inside of the business who, initially said he was trying to, escape the cold. However, further investigation showed there was property stacked up by the window. The victim confirmed that that property was moved, and we arrested the person for burglary. I mean, so you could expound a little bit, but it's not a lot. If you're kind of wondering the other one, so that was a Rialto probable cause form. So there's two types. This one is from the sheriff's department. It's the same thing. It's probably a little more detailed, but here's the narrative part that you would type in. Or again, you can use the Rialto one, which is the same thing. It's just kind of a little less cool looking, I guess, where you fill in this information and you just type in your very short probable cause. Does all of this make sense, or is everybody stressed out? I don't hear crying in the background or see people throwing things or anything like that. So I'm going to go with the fact that everybody kind of gets it. So and I tell you in here as well, at least I think I did. Go down further. Let's see here. Yeah. So okay. So here's the form. So I'm going to start doing this to help you out as well. And as we start to catch on a little bit more, I'll probably stop. But here's what you're going to need for this particular writing assignment. Because it's a crime and an arrest, you're going to need that crime incident report. Remember, you can use the big one that has all of the pages in it, or you can use the individual one. Sometimes it's easier just to use the full one. So there's going to be evidence that was basically kind of stolen and recovered. You're going to need a narrative. And you've already done all these. These are things that you've already done. And then you're just going to need this one little probable cause form. So this is what you're going to need right here for this week's writing assignment. It's not that much more work because it's only about a paragraph. Okay, so just to kind of show your probable cause. Does this week's writing assignment make sense?
Yeah.
And if anybody has any trouble or problems, etc., I will be, I have office hours tomorrow night, and I will be there if you need to pop in and we need to kind of talk about it or something like that. But I'm pretty sure that you've already done everything else. The only new piece is that probable cause piece. So that's the only new addition to this week's particular assignment. So in kind of moving into the lecture, and then when I'm done, I'll ask, we'll kind of go back over and see if anybody has any questions. Chapter 6 covers the different types of reports because there's, in law enforcement, there's going to be a lot of different reports. You're going to run into all kinds of things. In some agencies, they have their own report. You can see like the sheriffs have their own probable cause report. Rialto has their own. And depending upon where you work, they're probably going to have their own. And we've already been able to utilize some of these forms, and we know they're there to capture, certain information. So, the collection, the documentation of information about specific criminal investigations and the forms or reports that are needed to accomplish these, can sometimes seem a little bit time consuming. And, yeah, there's a lot of paperwork in policing, and I think you're starting to kind of see that. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Imagine if you had to write 4 or 5 of these a shift, or maybe even more, depending upon where you work. But if there's a particular form that your department that you're going to work for uses to capture that information, or involves a specific type of criminal investigation, you're going to use that one. But I wanted to kind of show you, and this chapter kind of just opens your eyes a little bit to the different types of things that you're going to run across. Not all of them, but some of them. So the first type of a report, because it really is a report, is a ticket. And if you've received a traffic ticket, sometimes they call them summons. That's more kind of an East Coast language. But a traffic citation, a traffic ticket, that is technically by law a report. And it documents the violation, the person's name, and there's actually a back side of that traffic ticket where the officer can write like a little narrative or something like that. There are traffic crash reports. We don't like to call them accident reports because a lot of times they're not just an accident. There's a reason for a crash, so either a collision or traffic, but there's traffic reports. And I believe the next chapter that we get into is going to talk about that. There are reports. Some agencies have separate report forms for misdemeanors versus a felony. A lot of agencies use the same thing. Like Rialto, it uses the same crime incident page for a misdemeanor or a felony. It doesn't matter. But some departments kind of separate them. So somebody tell me what a misdemeanor crime is. Give me one example of a misdemeanor.
Petty theft.
Petty theft. That's a good one. So petty theft, that would be, it's a citable offense, and that would be a misdemeanor. So how about a felony?
A rape.
Okay, so yes, a sexual assault, a rape, homicide, robbery, those bigger one, bigger type crimes. So that's, again, some agencies will use the same forms like Rialto, where you could see where you just change the section, the crime section. But then some departments kind of separate them. It just depends. Some departments have separate domestic violence reports. And then some agencies use the same crime or incident face page for a domestic violence. Same with an incident report or a suspicious circumstance. Maybe there's no real crime, but there was something very suspicious and you document that. Some departments will have what they call a suspicious circumstance report. Other departments use the same crime incident page for a suspicious circumstance. Like maybe initially you thought it was a kidnapping or something and it turned out maybe it wasn't. Or you weren't able to establish a crime at the time, but it's just suspicious activity. So these are different types of reports that you're going to run across. Some other things that are there, and we'll talk in other chapters later on, but these are also little reports. A CHP 180, which is basically when you get your car impounded or your car towed. It's done on what we call a CHP 180 form. There's a separate report form for a DUI arrest. There's a separate report for an under the influence of a controlled substance. There's an FI card, which is an example which I have on the screen right here. Technically, it's kind of a little report because it is documenting information. Then there's gang cards. There's even booking forms. When you transport someone to county jail, you're going to have to fill out what we call a booking form that might have some medical questions on it, what the charges were, etc. And there's even what they call an MO form, which detectives might keep a file of different, MOs, the way that people commit certain types of crimes. Not the why, but the way that they do it. So there's all these different types of forms out there. So that's kind of what Chapter 6 is telling you, is that there's a lot out there. So to start off with quickly, a traffic ticket. As a law enforcement officer, part of your job is going to be enforcing regular laws, criminal laws. But you're also going to be required to do a couple of different traffic enforcement aspects. And one's going to be what they call directed, and the other is going to be proactive. And there's no such thing, before somebody asks, there's no such thing as a quota. Okay, so and a quota is where the assumption is that you have to go out and you have to write so many traffic tickets per shift. There's no quota, but if you're a traffic officer or a motor officer, and that's your only job is to go out and enforce traffic laws, the expectation is that you would write more tickets than your average patrol officer. So there's no quota, but you should be out there working traffic so that way you can, deal with speed violations, red light violations, DUI violations, etc. But these are the two different types of traffic patrol. Typically, it's directed or proactive. And proactive basically is an enforcement practice where a police officer enforces traffic laws in their area of patrol without any basic kind of direction or directive. So maybe during your shift, you're out there patrolling and somebody drives by you at 90 miles an hour and throws trash out of the window that lands on the hood of your police car, which has happened to me before. And then you pull them over and you would write them a citation for whatever violations you observed. But you're not assigned to a specific area of directed enforcement. This is just your everyday duties. So this is called proactive. Whereas directed is a practice where law enforcement is directed or assigned to monitor traffic violations occurring at a specific area. So the example I give is an officer that is directed to patrol a certain location due to vehicle speeding. Maybe it's a downtown area, or you're having a lot of traffic collisions. Or typically we get complaints at schools where parents are parking in, double parking, triple parking, etc., and they want law enforcement to come out and deal with, kids walking through the cars to try to get to the curb, etc. So that would be a directed traffic enforcement. So proactive is just kind of, what you see as you're patrolling. Directed is something where you're assigned because there's some type of problem or some type of issue going on. And again, you're going to end up with a traffic ticket. One interesting thing with traffic tickets, typically, and this was back in 2008, but there's not a lot of other data out there, but about 43% of all contact, people have contact with law enforcement and the public is through traffic stops. And traffic stops are really one of a really easy way to a lot of times make good felony arrests because you're frequently contacting people through traffic instead of just pedestrian stops. So there's a lot of contacts that are done routinely through traffic. And the links down here at the bottom, if you wanted to actually look at this report, you could look at it a little bit more. It's a report that was put out that talks about contacts between police and the public. I have one from 2008 and then one from 2015, which is a little bit more up to date, but it gives you, frequency of contact information. And if you've never seen a ticket, good for you. If you have seen a ticket, hopefully it wasn't issued to you. But here's an example in your textbook that shows you what a citation looks like. And on the back, this is kind of a bigger version of the back of a ticket. They have here a little probable cause thing. And again, some tickets have that, some don't. If you look at this is a citation from Rialto. Here's the front. So, and it's like a little report. And remember, I told you misdemeanors can be cited out. So you have traffic, non-traffic, misdemeanor. It's the same thing. The violation, direction of travel, signature. And then on the back, it's got other violations, etc. There's a sign-off area. And directly on the back of this, there would actually be a little narrative. So if the officer wanted to write something that maybe you said, or if they wanted to write something to remember what happened, they could actually do that. Traffic crashes or collision reports. Remember, we don't like to use the word accident. During a shift, basically can involve investigating, traffic collisions as they occur. Motor vehicle crashes can range in severity from minor property damage, meaning just like a little dent, to serious bodily injury and even fatalities. So, that's one of the reports that you're going to learn to write. We'll do a basic one, but you're going to learn in training and things like that how to write an actual crash report. So sometimes they're simple. and then sometimes they look like this. So, but when you do a collision report, it's typically, I mean, there's a couple of different things that you're going to do, but you still are going to use headings, and we'll look at those next week on our next chapter. And you still investigate it, just like you might a regular criminal report. So, same thing, but we'll talk more about that later. If you've never seen a collision report, this is an example out of your textbook of a collision report. It's got a little narrative, and you can see even on there in the book, they use headings. Same thing. So there's, driver's statements, officer's investigation, etc. So, I mean, same thing. This is a collision report from Rialto. A lot of agencies use this standard in California, use this standard CHP collision report. And it's kind of like a crime report. It's got basic information, the locations, the date and time, the driver's information, etc. On the back, it's got some little check the boxes to where the officer will, put in, was it light outside? Was it wet? Was it raining? Was it a pedestrian involved, etc.? And then a little place to do a sketch. So, but again, we'll learn more about this in a week or so. I just wanted you to see what one of those reports looks like. So another type of report, misdemeanor, misdemeanor crimes. Misdemeanor citations and complaint forms are used with, for criminal cases, which could result in a jail sentence of 1 year or less, plus a possible fine. The top portion typically contains boxes to be checked and blank spaces for the charge, etc. The narrative is often on the back. And remember, again, some of your complaint forms might be the same. Like I said, a lot of departments use the same form for a misdemeanor crime and a felony. Your textbook kind of breaks it up a little bit for you. But remember, they talked about for misdemeanor crime and even for a felony, there's this probable cause thing that has to be filled out. Okay, and it applies to both misdemeanor and felony cases unless you get a cite release. Because if you're going to go to county jail and get cited out, you don't need to show the booking officer probable cause to keep you in jail because you're going to get cite released anyway. Does that kind of make sense? Most misdemeanors nowadays you're going to get cite released either at the scene, or if you get transported to the county jail, you're going to get released on a citation at the jail for most misdemeanors. Not all, but most. Typically on felonies, you're not going to get released right away unless you post bail. So just remember these little, if you're not going to get a cite release, you still have to do the little probable cause form. Your textbook has a couple of examples. Same thing, kind of what I showed you from Rialto, kind of the example that the officer wrote. It doesn't have to be quite this long. It just needs to establish the probable cause that you used to arrest the person. That's all it really needs to be, because you don't want to write your report twice. So, we talked about misdemeanor and felony crimes. Here's the face page that I think most of you have been using. It's kind of the Rialto one. This can be used for a misdemeanor or a felony. It's the same thing. So Rialto kind of does the same thing. This is the second page. If you're using the complete report, and here's the probable cause form that Rialto uses. So felony crimes, remember, those are criminal offenses that are typically upon conviction, it has a higher sentence, meaning that it has the potential for state prison or more than a year in jail. And we've already done a couple of felony crime reports, and this week we're actually doing a felony arrest report. Same thing. Here's an example in your textbook of a felony face sheet, but we're using you can use either the RSO or Rialto face pages, either one. But this is an example from your textbook. Here's Rialto's. Same form, misdemeanor, felony. It's the exact same thing. The only thing that would change, report type, you could put misdemeanor, felony, follow-up, etc. And here's the charge. So if it was a misdemeanor, it'd be someone said 488, so it'd be penal code, or 484 PC, petty theft. If it's a burglary, it'd be 459 PC, burglary. Okay, etc. So again, and I think a lot of the departments typically use these forms interchangeably, so you don't have to have a separate form for every single type of report, because I mean it's just easier this way. So you've already seen this report here. So this is the full report, the Rialto one. Remember, it's got the 4 things on it. This is the one that you don't have to use, but if you do, it's got everything already built in for your felony report. And then for this week, you're just going to add this little probable cause form. So nothing more than you've already done. Domestic violence, a lot of states have mandatory arrests for domestic violence incidents involving an injury. For a lot of different agencies, you would use their, the standard incident form. So for Rialto, you would use that same form. We don't have a separate form for domestic violence. You would use the same crime pages. Some agencies might have a separate form, and then you would have to use that one. So just know that some have it and some don't. It just kind of depends. So here, the example in your textbook, they have a separate domestic violence form, where typically in California, we use the same crime phase pages for misdemeanors and felonies. And then they have a probable cause statement. So these are all in your book. An incident report, these are typically forms that are utilized for calls for service that don't fit into any type of criminal case, or some, other kind of case report. Some agencies will have, like Rialto or the sheriffs, that same crime incident report can be an incident report. That's just the type that you put in there. So if it's a suspicious circumstance, etc., you're just going to write that in there. So, but some agencies have an actual incident report. So just kind of know that. Some of those, things that fall into this weird incident report thing might be a dispute, a civil dispute, between neighbors, or, property ownership, maybe violation of some type of rule or ordinance or something similar, or child custody. We use that a lot, where we'll write an incident report because there's maybe a violation of child custody where we don't make an arrest, but we want to document what happened. So we might file what we call an incident report on some type of child custody or something like that. So these are common situations for that. And your example in the book, they have a special form for that. Typically in California, again, you use the same thing. Same with the suspicious circumstance report. The only difference is that an incident report is, or these reports are non-criminal, and a suspicious circumstance report could lead to a criminal investigation, but maybe not. So it just depends. A lot of agencies use like those field interview cards I was talking about. Technically little reports, if you will, but you might fill one of these out and this information is entered into your department's computer database. So this would be what we call a field interview card. If you stop someone that you thought was involved in criminal activity, but maybe you couldn't establish a crime, you could fill out this field interview card, and at least you would have something on file that has all of the person's information on it. So again, some of these suspicious circumstance could be a suspicious vehicle parked in a neighborhood that doesn't belong there, somebody loitering in an area where they kind of don't belong, maybe an adult contacting students near a school but you couldn't really establish any type of crime, but you wanted to document something in case somebody was maybe molested later or something like that. So a lot of different things. Visitors, people going in and out of a residence late at night, and you get a call of possible narcotics activity, but you can't substantiate anything. So you're just going to fill out those FI cards. So those are good kind of informational things. So there's just some examples. So some tips, just really quick. Just kind of look through when you go to that forms page that's in every one of our weekly modules. Just look at the different reports. That's all. We're not going to fill them all out this semester, but look at some of the different ones that I posted in there so you can kind of get an understanding. Because again, a lot of agencies use a lot of these different types of reports, and sometimes, they don't. It just depends. Um, with all your reports, remember, be accurate, be brief, be complete, and make sure that we can understand it. Make sure you can read your own writing. If you were to fill out one of those FI cards, make sure that that the person that's entering the data can actually read it and kind of understand what it says. Here's that CHP 180 just to show you what it looks like. So if there's a car that gets towed, this is the form that most agencies in California use. Matter of fact, probably all agencies that, and it's just got some check the boxes, etc. And then down here, a little diagram of the car. So if there's some damage on the car and some remarks, so you would put in here, maybe the vehicle was impounded because the driver was arrested, or it was a stolen vehicle and recovered, or what have you. It was impounded as evidence used in a crime, etc. So this is what a CHP 180 looks like. This is a missing persons report. This is something that you'll run into a lot. If somebody reports somebody missing, there's a pre-printed form for that. And most agencies kind of have their own. So this is what you would fill out. Remember I talked about an MO form? A lot of detectives have these, and I know the boxes are hard to see in your forms page. I think I did post this, and I'll get to you just real quick, Destiny. This is something that if you have individuals that are committing crimes in a certain way, you would fill out this MO form and you'd keep it in a file cabinet, so maybe you'd be able to link this person to other crimes. Okay, go ahead.
My question was are we going to do a missing person report in any of our assignments, or were you just showing that?
I was just showing it to you.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're probably not gonna get into some of the smaller reports, but I wanted you to at least be able to kind of see what it looks like and know that these agencies have these different types of forms. Remember when I talked about, here's another form. It's a booking slip is what we call it. So here, this is if you were to be transported, let's say you get arrested and they're going to take you over to San Bernardino County Jail to get booked. This is the form that I would have to fill out as far as a booking form. And it's going to be property, it's going to inventory your property. It's going to list tattoos or scars or marks, the type of crime, all of your personal information, etc. And it's going to come with a medical form as well. Are you sick or injured? Etc. Do you take any type of medication and things like that? So this would actually go with you over to county jail too. So while we're not going to fill them all out, I do want you to see them. Yes, Brandy.
I know she asked about the other one, and I'm sorry to be redundant, but as you go through these, could you let us know if these are ones we're going to do? Since I wanted to know particularly about this one, since I've seen it done at work and the disdain it causes.
So really quick, just tell me about why is there some disdain on the booking form?
No, it causes disdain with all of the officers that I see filling it out, and I see lots of rolled eyes and lots of heavy hearts on their way over to the cubby computer desk to go do their job. It just seems like this is the most hated of tasks.
And I think, okay, so that's actually interesting, because here's the thing, and maybe some of you are different. Most people don't like to write or fill out a bunch of forms or things like that, but unfortunately, if you're an attorney, if you're in the criminal justice system doing almost anything, probation, parole, social work, anything, you're going to be writing and filling out all of those forms. So I can actually, in my mind, since you mentioned the rolling of eyes, I can probably remember officers who are like, oh my gosh, do I have to do this booking form? Why can't the jailer do the booking form for me? So, I mean,
Right? They
yeah,
used to try to bribe each other. They'd joke around acting like they were bribing each other into doing each other's paperwork.
yeah, and it's a thing. But yeah, but unfortunately, these are things that you have to fill out. I'm not sure if we'll do a booking form. I know that later on we'll do a couple of other forms that are coming up, but I don't think we're going to do a booking one because this one, it's pretty basic. It's very self-explanatory. Um, I'm trying to keep you guys concentrating more on the little reports versus just doing the actual little forms because the forms are a little bit easier.
Oh, okay. Well, I know because this week we're doing an arrest.
You are, and so my curveball this week is the probable cause form.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
So, and here's another one just to kind of show you there are forms for, someone under the influence or whether it's alcohol or drugs. And these are all pre-printed forms. Some agencies have their own, and some, you know, use kind of the state's form. And you can see here, this would be the walk the line or the finger to nose or different. But these are all things that just look and again take a few minutes when you can and go on that forms page and just click on each form and kind of look at it and just see the different types that are out there because you know they're out there. Here's Riverside County Sheriff's DUI form, and this one has fill in the blank, so that's why you see the blue there because you can actually type into this one. um, so again, there is a lot of paperwork, and a lot of little boxes and a lot of data and a lot of stuff that really can be frustrating sometimes. But it's just kind of the nature of the beast. Here's a gang card, and typically as an officer, you'll probably several times fill out gang cards. It's kind of this one is kind of twofold. Rialto made it where it can either be a field interview, like an FI card, or a gang card. So they kind of made it either one. It's the front and back so you can kind of see it. Here's one from the Sheriff's Department that's filled out. And these are important, especially for accuracy. And the reason for that, again, if you're filling out, this is a gang card right here. You're going to put the person's name, their information, what gang they're claiming, maybe some tattoos, scars, or marks. And then there's some comments. Because when individuals end up going to county jail, and even more so prison, but typically county jails, they're going to not put them in certain areas if they belong to a certain gang. So this is at San Bernardino, here is a county gang ID card. So when they get booked, the booking officer is going to fill out all of this information, reference their gang, if they're claiming a gang, etc. And if they are, then they're going to be housed in certain units because they don't want to mix certain gangs together because it just causes, obviously you can tell it's going to cause problems. This would be something that they would fill out, same thing, where they would classify and they would talk about gangs. And there's some important parts to this for accuracy because right here, all of this is subpoenaable, meaning that if you had to go to court to testify that someone was a gang member for a gang enhancement, when they get booked in at the jail, and this is self-admitted gang member from here. So here it's East Side Santa Paula, 12th Street with the moniker of Rambo, okay, tattoos, etc. So this guy is self-admitting that this is him and this is his gang and his street name, etc. So if he ever had to go to court, you could prove by subpoena and bringing this document to court to show that this person self-admitted that they were a gang member. And thus you could use that towards the enhancement. So even though it's a small little thing like a gang card or an FI card, we solve a lot of crimes through these little field identification cards with suspicious activity, etc. Or again, by using these gang cards. And one of the primary reasons, and we're just about done, one of the primary reasons for all of those little boxes, those I wouldn't say hundreds, but all the little boxes and all that data is that, remember, every crime okay, in the United States is supposed to be reported to the FBI, who is kind of the overseer of what they call the UCR report, or the Uniform Crime Report. And if you were to go to, let's see if it'll let me do this real quick. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So this is basically the UCR page. And every department, again, in the the United States, is required to report certain types of crimes. Okay, and certain felony crimes, only a couple of misdemeanors, but different types of things like hate crimes. If we were to go to the actual UCR page, you could find your city that you work for, and what state. It's going to be the numbers of crimes here. There's all the different data that you can find in here, and you can even go from time frame to different time frame. You can see how crime has changed, but this is all from the data that your records department enters based on each crime, and that's stored in your computer and then sent to the FBI. So I'm kind of hoping that that makes a little bit of sense. So that's the reason for all of those boxes. So we can tell how many crimes involved a firearm, how many crimes involved, a knife, how many crimes involved this, how many crimes involved that, different ages of suspects, different ages of victims, all of that. Same with use of force data, hate crime, law enforcement officers injured and killed. All of this falls into this UCR reporting system. So that's why it's super important that you fill out all of those boxes that are really kind of a pain in the rear, but that's the reason that you're doing it. So don't just think that, well, man, I'm filling all this out because they just want me to have all this busy work. No, there's data that goes to the UCR that we're going to use to track crime across the United States. So that's the rationale for that. Okay, with that being said, that's going to wrap up the lecture part. I've shown you a couple of examples of the new thing that we're going to do this week. So we're going to add, so here's what you need one more time for this week's assignment. If you go down, and I'm going to start putting this kind of in this kind of a format. Each week I'll expound a little bit, give you a little bit more information, but I tell you what probable cause is right here. When you go to the forms page, there's two different probable cause sheets. You can use either one. And here for this assignment this week, you're going to use your crime incident pages that you've already done. There's evidence. So, if you use the larger crime incident face pages, it's got the 4 in there. That this evidence page is already in there. A narrative with headings. Remember, headings, headings, headings. And then the new thing you're going to add is that very short probable cause slip. And I will post tonight, hopefully, in here. I'll just put it in here, a template, an example of a probable cause form filled out. So that way you can kind of look at it and go, okay, this is kind of how it's supposed to look or sound or flow, just to kind of help you out. And I'll kind of continue to do that as we go through the semester to give you a little bit more information. A lot of you are doing great. I'm seeing a lot of, more content, more stuff, which I really appreciate. But, do me a favor and don't take this the wrong way, but don't get lazy when you write. Really kind of think outside of the box. If you saw, again, the comments that I wrote on some of the things for your reports was, think about, Miranda, when you called that person on the phone who was a possible suspect, should you have had to Mirandize them? And I wasn't going to mark you down if you did or you didn't or whatever. I just wanted you to know that these are things that you should think about because you are calling a suspect. And you're going to have to decide, do I read them their rights beforehand? And, or do I even have to lawfully? And if I do, maybe they'll say, I don't want to talk to you. And now you're not going to get a statement, which could totally happen. I mean, if somebody called you up on the phone and said something like that, they start off, are you so-and-so? Yes, you have the right to remain silent. I'm not sure I'd want to talk to them after that. So those are just things to remember and things to think about. So again, I'm going to take a picture of the roll sheet. I'm not taking pictures of you guys. Okay, so I don't want you to think I'm like kind of weird. I just want to make sure I get everybody that was here tonight, so I can go back and do that. Any questions while we're kind of starting to wrap up?
Hey, for our question.
Yes.
Hey, so will we do any more in progress reports like stolen, like a rolling stolen, or anything that's like in progress where it's like action by action instead of more of the report? Like,
yes, there are a few of those short videos that are going to be like without giving it all away. Yeah, there's going to be a couple. I'm not sure if one's a stolen car. I know there's a domestic violence. I know there's a robbery, things like that. So again, don't get freaked out when a couple of you I think got a little worried because the headings didn't quite maybe fit in this last one, the one we did last week, where it was kind of a follow up. But stick to the headings, and I think they're really going to help you. Get out of the habit of writing one big, huge paragraph, and start sectioning it off. And if you don't section it off exactly right, it's okay, because I'll just tell you in my comments back, hey, great job. Maybe you could have just moved this over here, and maybe move this down here, or combine these two together. A couple of those I saw where we had a notification. Actually, before the notification, we had like a little pair, or like a couple sentences that was almost the same as the notification. Well, you could have probably just combined those all together and streamlined it and just made it, notification, or arrival observation. But stick to the headings. That I'm telling you, as much as I'm annoying you about it, that's how you're going to write. That's how you're going to see how you write. Even when we do a traffic collision report next week, it's going to be headings, and you're going to see that. So keep that part up, and then start thinking about your content on questions that you may have to ask, or your investigation on what maybe you're going to do, etc. Anything else that I'm missing? I think I see a chat here. I want to make sure I didn't.
I had a question about that question, actually.
Okay.
I noticed, especially in this last week's report, in my narrative, even though I'm using the headings, it still seems like I'm doing the one giant paragraph because there's a lot more to put under investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Is that typical for just like follow-ups? Is that because it's just a follow-up, or should I be breaking it down further?
No, sometimes because it's a follow-up, maybe more of your information might fall under the investigation, because really it's going to be, your notification, or however you want to do the first thing. It's, this report is a follow-up investigation, reference this crime at this place. And then your next heading might be investigation. Hey, I contacted, or it might be victim statement. I contacted the victim. They said that people were stealing money. They suspect this person, for whatever reason. And then the investigation might be really long, because that's where more of your investigation might be.
Okay.
So the headings really are just to kind of help you think. So I'm glad you're actually thinking about these different ways to write it. And it's okay if it looks funny. Sometimes it might. Sometimes your headings might kind of even out, where each one is a paragraph or so.
Yeah.
But then maybe one of them is just going to be long because you have like a crime scene with a bunch of stuff, and you're just going to have more in your investigation. So don't panic. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
I just want to make sure. All right. Anybody else? If you have any issues at all, then again, feel free to hop on tomorrow at 6 o'clock. I'll be here. If you have anything that you want to talk about, or you can email me, etc. Make sure that if you are missing some of the lectures, the live part, that you're at least going back and reviewing the videos so you can catch what we're talking about now. And because a couple of you have, and I'm not bagging on you, I'm just saying I'm going to start to maybe start recording just a little bit earlier. So if you want to go back and kind of refresh it as I'm talking about the different, the assignment, etc., that part's in the lecture as well. So that way we're capturing everything and you don't have to worry. You can just go back and listen to that one part where I talk about, hey, this is how we're going to do this assignment. So maybe that will help as well. If nobody has anything else, we made it in a pretty decent amount of time and you are free to go.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay.
Have a good night, Fur.
All right. We'll see you guys.
I know I'm actually here this week. It's kind of funny.
I'm glad you could make it.
Yeah, I've been so swamped, and I've obviously been waiting till last minute, but I've been trying to get things done. It's just juggling work and getting ready for test